Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Curious Pod, an initiative by Students Research Cell of IMS DLEV. Today we have with us our guest, Dr. Rohan Trivedi. Mr. Trivedi is currently working at FIS based in Republic of Korea. He has a wide set of skills and experience in the fields of finance, business analysis and web development. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for calling me.
So we have a lot of insights that we want to get from Mr. Trivedi. So let's get started with the interview. First one is, we notice you have quite a lot of diverse fields in your career. So we would like to know how your professional journey began and how it progressed.
Okay, so I completed my engineering and then I did my MBA. It was a sponsored MBA from my company, and then I started researching in IMS. So initially I worked as a programmer, and that was Java programmer. And I had an experience in web technologies and I have an interest in it. Then later when I started getting into domain, finance is something which had my calling. So I thought of getting into finance. First company I joined from finance standpoint is like 12 years back, which is TCS. And I worked for CitiBank. So CitiBank, I worked for wealth management. So wealth management is typically done for high net worth individual. It was kind of a different experience, and it was the start of like financing journey. There I used to work with people for UAT of a software. Since my background was technical, so it was kind of like a technical role for me. But slowly I got more interest into finance and related fields. So I started reading. And then I started getting into compliance, KYC, all those kind of things. I used to work for like brokerage module. There are different modules like mutual funds, stocks, options. But mainly I focused on mutual funds and KYC. Later I moved to a different project, and that is where I got into fund accounting. So my fund accounting journey starts with Morgan Stanley Fund Services. And we were consultants over there. Our role was to like integrate all the verticals there, because they have very small software for each and every task, and most of their tasks are done using Excel based things. So we have to assist the development team to have an dedicated applications, say it be desktop application or a web application, and integrate all those applications into one ecosystem where right from the point you create master data to the point you actually have the nav published. So that has to be automated, and that has to be on like database based system rather than an Excel based system. Then I moved to FIS, and in FIS I largely worked for almost a decade now on Invest One fund accounting system. So that system is itself I think it's the leading software in its domain. It got around 32 plus clients all across the globe, and it asset under management, it does around like $4 trillion asset under management. So it is one of the biggest product you can see. It started like 35 years back, and it's still going and thriving. So that's a short of what I've done so far.
That is quite a journey. So could you please explain in a nutshell to our audience what fund accounting and wealth management actually is, and how, if at all, it is different from investment banking?
Okay, so I would say wealth management is itself a larger term, because the purpose there is you have high net worth individual. They have enormous amount of like money to invest into markets. Since they don't have expertise to get into that market and invest, they hire professionals to do that. So those professionals in North America are typically the registered professionals who's going to look after the asset, and then they go on and invest into market. So those people use a software called Netix 360. So it's a prime brokerage software where they come and have that managed. So from that standpoint, wealth management standpoint, it's just a part of it. There are many other things where you have front office handling the queries and the other things. There will be middle office who will be enriching trade, processing trade, and all those things. Risk also comes under middle office. Then you have back office, which actually process and settle down the trade. after back office comes the fund management team. So basically they handles the assets and the liabilities, and on the basis of that helps in generating statements and the NAV.
Right.
So that is wealth management, and fund accounting is just a part of it from the workflow perspective.
Okay, great. So now that we have a basic understanding about what you do, we are curious to know how did you get keen to the field? Like what made you realize that this is your professional calling?
Okay, so in industry, people like me are called technocrats, sort of like techno-functional people, because I have an understanding of technology, how technology works, and I have a fair understanding of how the domain works. When I say domain, means how the assets work. When I say asset, again, you can drill down to capital markets. So I have an understanding of technology side and the domain side. So this combination typically helps a lot, because everything you do in finance world is going to be done on a system, on a software. If you have understanding of how software work, and if you have an understanding of how finance work, that fairly do well all along. So I think I understand finance and I understand software. That's what like I kind of fall for a profile like that.
Right. So as you mentioned, your technical background helped you with the finance rules. So how can someone who is from a non-technical background keep up with the changing trends in the field?
So in industry, there are like two sides of it. We call it buy side industry and sell side industry, right? So buy side people are the people who buy services from the sell side, and sell side people are the people who sell their services. I'll give you an example. Reuters, Bloomberg's, these are the company which provides the pricing, FX rate. So these are the services consumed by the prime brokers or fund management companies or AMCs. So AMCs and all these companies which consume their services are on the buy side of it, right? So a non-technical person have a scope in buy side industry and sell side industry. There are operations happening day in day out on all these things. So say it like fund accounting. So there are like start of the day activity, mid of the day activity, and end of the day activity. Start of the day activity is typically like if there is a corporate action. So I have a portfolio, and portfolio have a holding of like 100 securities. Out of 100 securities, 5 of them have a corporate action today. So start of the day activity should be to go and see how many assets have corporate action today and what kind of corporate action you have there. So there is a specific team called corporate action team who's going to do that, right? So that team will have people who are non-technical background. So they'll be like operations people. They'll be doing things related to operations. They can fall under middle office or back office in this case. So front office jobs are a little different than middle office and back office job. But you don't need a technical understanding of everything if you want to get into a middle office or back office job. And for that matter, even like fund accounting teams doesn't require that technical understanding. Since I am from technical background, I chose the software field where the software which handle these operations is developed by my company. So it's a good fit for me. But the people who are from non-technical background, they don't have to worry. They can just go and apply for an operations job, or rather, I think campus are here to hire you guys. So
right.
They'll place you into like middle office or a back office or something of that sort.
Okay, great. So finance graduates who are aiming to build a career in wealth management, apart from the conventional educational degrees, what do you suggest they take? What course of action do you suggest them to take to build their skills in the field?
I think first thing you should all do is to read news, keep up with the trends.
Right.
Second thing is you can go for a specialized kind of area or a domain where you see yourself like down the line 5 years or 10 years. When you get into a job, it's not your selection where you're going to be placed, it's the company's selection where they need people and put you there. But slowly, if you have an understanding of the domain where you want to get in, you'll slowly move towards it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If you want to get into like accounting side of it, do a CFA. CFA is something which is US based accounting system. You get to know that. If you want to go into there, start preparing for it. And it's an exam which you can take it along with your studies. Nobody's going to stop you. Then there is a separate field called compliance. Then there is tax, legal. So there are many verticals where you can actually go and have your niche created. But don't expect that company is going to hire you for that job. You have to work hard and you have to build yourself and aim that down the line 5 years or 10 years.
Right, that would be really helpful for our audience. So there is a prevailing thought amongst finance graduates that in order to excel in the field, you need to have knowledge about data science and programming languages like R, Python, etc. So how relevant and how significant a role it plays in the actual working in the field?
Okay, so there are some things which is going to help you a lot. One of them is Excel. Knowledge of Excel is really important and very basic. So in Excel you have basic Excel, advanced Excel, and there are super advanced Excel where you go on writing macros, VBAs and all those things. And in finance, capital markets, everybody is using that. Without Excel you cannot survive. Other thing which you can learn a little bit is Python, because Python is a Swiss knife. You can use it anywhere you want. So if you have a set of data, you want to run it along, have some numbers churning and have a result, post it into a file and email it to your boss, you can just write a script for all these specific tasks, and that script will be reusable. So basically in industry, people look for removing the redundant task and making it more efficient and operationally more optimized. So that is something which is appraised. But from other tools like R, I'm not sure if people are using, because from industry where I come, I've not seen people using R. We have some projects running in AIML, but AIML is still coming up and you have to have a specific use case. And I don't believe there are many use cases right now in the industry which qualifies for the use of that technology. If you use AIML for small things, that's an overkill. So I recommend not to do that. Other things which I think big data, and there are fancy technologies coming in. So students should not focus on those areas, because when a recruiter comes from these companies, they look for the very basic subject like finance. You have to have a very sound understanding of assets and liabilities, how they are done, how is a credit debit done, how is a journal written, how are the statements generated, what is a trial balance. These are very basic things which is needed day in, day out in the industry. If you really want to understand from operations perspective how things works, you can read things around it. But apart from that, I don't see a use of having a certification in AWS or some fancy technology just to from recruiters perspective. It might not be a good choice.
Right, that was quite a myth buster. So moving ahead, could you please explain us fund life cycle with perspective of fund accounting?
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, the principle remains the same. In every country, the bodies, legal bodies, watchdogs will change from country to country, right? So basically a fund can be a hedge fund, a mutual fund, or a private equity. So there are various types of funds, right? And on the basis of that, there are different asset management companies specialized in those specific types of funds, right? So let's talk about mutual fund, and we'll talk about very basic architecture of how this fund is treated all across, and that will give you a fair understanding of all the different types of funds which I just talked about, right? So first thing is, a company can raise money from investors and invest into the market. This is a very basic principle, but can they really do it? That is something which is a legal question. So in India, it's not possible. So Sahara is a classic case where they collected money, invested into, but they didn't have the right approvals from SEBI, so they got into trouble. So what a fund administrator or a fund company will do is, they'll create a group of people that is typically called a trust, but it has different names as well. And there will be an individual called a sponsorer. So this sponsorer is a director of an original company which forms a trust. In India, the old rule says that it should be 6 plus 1 or 7 people who should be there in the board. These people, first thing they do is they create a subsidiary. That subsidiary, like for example, Reliance Limited, then they have Reliance Mutual Fund Private Limited. So this subsidiary of Reliance Limited is going to handle with the money. And this will be notified to SEBI and other bodies related to it. Now they are a legal body which can go ahead and collect money on behalf of it, invest into market, give returns, right? First thing they do is they'll hire a fund accountant. Sometimes we confuse it like it's just a person. There is a person called fund accountant, but it is largely a team of people which do certain activities in that domain, right? So there will be maybe 1 team, 2 team. There will be fund accountants which are really good in debt funds. There are some who are good in equity. There are some who are good in derivatives. So they have their own specializations and attribute with them, right? So these people, the board which we have just formed under the subsidiary, these people hire the team which is called fund managers typically, right? Their resume is again sent back to SEBI, and SEBI verifies that these people are real people, they are not fraud and all those due diligence. Once that is done, then the job of this team, fund managers, will be to create certain options of fund, right? So these options can be specialized option or maybe a mix and match of something. They can be specialized debt funds, equity funds, balance fund, blue chip fund. There are fancy names to it. So you go on naming them, and they create some documents called key information memorandum, which is being read by the investors before investing into it. So what they do is they create certain options in mutual fund, or in mutual fund they create some options, and that will be sold to the investors. So there is something called distributor. So distributor are the people who call you every now and then, say, okay sir, do you want to invest into mutual fund? So these people have a very limited role. They come into the picture, they sell the product, take their commission, get out of the system. So that's all the distributor is going to do. Now these investor who's like just showed intent to buy certain flavor of the mutual fund, they put their money into it, and the money goes back to the subsidiary company. So if you have opened a mutual fund, you might have seen that you've given it to Reliance Mutual Fund Private Limited. By the way, I'm not sponsoring it, it's just an example. So it goes to that bank. So that bank, sometimes we call clearing bank, because we will be using that bank to do certain things, right? So you will have a clearing bank. Then you have something called a DP there. So DP is very much similar to, for individual you see Demat account. It's very much similar to that, right? Then there is one other party which is called custodian. Okay. So like you put your money in bank, you put your holdings in custodian, under custodian. So he'll have know-how of how much holding of how much, like IBM 500 shares you have. So custodian will know that, right? Then with all these 3 parties, you have something called broker. And broker is the person who will get you to the exchange and make these deals available to you. Okay. So there will be a broker like Sher Khan and Angel Broker. So these are like for people like us, but there are like brokerage firms which are very much specialized doing it for mutual funds or different kinds of funds, right? So we talked about custodian, we talked about DPs, we talked about brokers, we talked about clearing bank. There is one more party which is called RTA, which is Register and Transfer Agency. So the role of RTA is bookkeeping. They just do the bookkeepings of how many subscriptions are there. Subscriptions mean an investor comes and buys the unit, and how many units are redeemed today, or how many units are exchanged from one fund option to other fund option. So all these information of bookkeeping is done by RTA, Register and Transfer Agency. When I say the other side of it, the exchange side of it, there are like many things happening in there. There's like 7 to 8 steps how a trade is settled and cleared. So clearing and settlement is altogether a different process. We can maybe talk about it a little later, but that's the other side of it, right? and this is the complete cycle of how the fund is created and how the fund is operational throughout the day. Where we belong to this system, we are nowhere in this system, because when all these things happen, then the file is created and sent to a fund accountant. Okay, so it is very similar to like you buy, sell things, you have salary in your account, and towards the end of March you hire a CA and give him a file and say that, okay, do an accounting for me. So fund accounting is typically like that. When everything happens, like front office, middle office, back office, end of the day you'll account it into the books of account. So that is fund accounting.
Right. That was quite insightful. Thank you for explaining it so well. So moving further, as you mentioned, you have worked for quite some time in the Republic of Korea. So how has it been different from working in India? What would you say are the pros and cons of working abroad?
I think like I can say that 90-95% workforce is from India. So no matter which vertical you come in, everybody is working from India.
Right.
Like operations, front office, there may be a desk in US, UK or somewhere, but the actual processing happens in India, in Mumbai or in Pune or Bangalore or somewhere like that. Middle office, same case. Back office, same case. So anywhere there is operations, I think Indians are the best in doing all those things. So from your perspective, most of your if you get into that industry, you will be hired to those jobs only, right? If you talk about the work culture, I think Koreans are like way above our working environment, because we typically work 9 to 5. They come at 9 o'clock, but they don't have a time to go back to home. So they're really hardworking people. Like 11-12 hours is like just working hours for them. So it's really difficult to adapt to that environment where the work is above everything. So I think that is something which we should have learned from them. But yeah, from all the other perspective, India is doing fairly good, and everything you do in any part of the world, it will come back in India to settle down. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you, sir, for giving us your time. This was really insightful and this really added value to our knowledge.